I want to welcome everybody here to this conference, and I'm going to give a little bit of a framing talk in a minute, but first I want to give the words to Dr. Rahendra Pachauri, the chair of the IPCC, because the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has been very supportive of this idea of having a conference on transformation. Transformation is emerging as an important theme in the Fifth Assessment Report, and we're learning also that we don't have a lot of knowledge and understanding of what it means and how we do it. So I'd like to give, Dr. Pachauri could not be here for the conference. He was here in Oslo last week, and he delivered this video in welcome to all of us. So we'll just sit and watch it for a few minutes.
Good day to you, colleagues and friends. I'm delighted to have been given this opportunity to speak to you through video. I would have preferred to be present in person, but unfortunately I had a conflict of dates with regard to another commitment, and I'm sorry that I can't be present with you in person. However, I hope through this very brief video I can convey my best wishes and greetings to you, and also highlight the importance of the conference that you're going to be participating in. In view of the importance of the conference, the IPCC has co-sponsored this, and I'm very grateful to my good friend and colleague Dr. Karen O'Brien for all the effort that she has put in to make this conference a great success, which I'm sure it will be. Now, we are definitely facing some very critical choices for the future. Today, we are living in a society which everybody says is essentially what defines the 21st century, that being of a knowledge society. Now, if that were the case, then clearly we have to shape our actions and decisions, and in fact even our values, based on information and knowledge that is available to us. We know now for a fact that climate change is causing some very serious impacts. I'm not going to go into all the impacts of climate change, which of course have been very well documented in the fourth assessment report of the IPCC and other material that the IPCC has brought out. But I do want to refer to our special report, which deals with managing the risks of extreme events and disasters to advance climate change adaptation. Now, in this report, we have clearly brought out some of the risks associated with extreme events and disasters that clearly are connected with climate change. And I want to mention just two of them: the increase in the frequency and intensity of heat waves, which, as you would recall, have been quantified in terms of a very important statement. And that statement clearly reflects the fact that those heat waves, which are currently taking place once in 20 years, will, by the end of the century, if we do nothing about this challenge, will take place once in 2 years. We've also highlighted the increase in extreme precipitation events, and these obviously will have major impacts on life and property, and they would also have very serious implications for the availability of water. So therefore, we are really taking actions today. We are on a path of development and growth which has very major implications for the future of humanity and all living species on this planet. Now, one could say that if we can adapt to all these impacts, these extreme events and disasters, then why worry about anything else? Why would there be a need for bringing about any form of transformation? Well, the reality is, we said very clearly in our report that limits to resilience can be faced if we cross tipping points and thresholds associated with natural systems or social systems, and therefore we really have no choice but to also think in terms of mitigation of emissions of greenhouse gases, and this necessarily will require some effort in bringing about a transformation. Because again, as we have stated in the special report, certainly we would need some incremental changes, but those may not be adequate. We would also have to bring about some transformational changes, and these would deal not only with adapting to the impacts of climate change or these extreme events and disasters, but essentially reducing, perhaps on a very stringent basis, the emissions of greenhouse gases if we want to stabilize the climate of this planet. So, in my view, this is an extremely important conference that is being organized, because I think human society needs to get knowledge and must be given choices by which we can bring about a transformation that essentially stabilizes the climate of this planet and therefore ensures that coming generations and the future of humanity and other living species can be safeguarded in the manner that I think a responsible society would want to do. In conclusion, let me say that the paper that's been prepared by Karen O'Brien and Linda Signia is really an extremely valuable piece of literature. And I'm sure the amount of material, information and insights that are contained in this paper will provide a very valuable basis for carrying out a detailed discussion of the issues that are going to be dealt with in this conference. So, I would, as a start, request each of you to focus on the issues that have been highlighted in this paper, which is extremely well presented. And I hope that this conference is only one of many that perhaps we need to organize all over the world, because it is vitally important for human society and every section of the human race across this planet to understand the kinds of choices that are available to us, and the fact that transformation as a word is something that we need not be afraid of, because human society has gone through several transformations in the past. But today, we have the power of knowledge, we have the power of understanding the science of climate change and all that is associated with it. And therefore, I think it is in keeping with the responsibility that we bear not only to this generation, but to generations yet to come, to be able to utilize this knowledge and to be able to take actions and decisions that would ensure a sustainable future for all humanity, and I would say the protection and the well-being of all species on planet Earth. So, I wish you all the best and I hope you have a wonderful time. I'm very sorry to be missing out on this extremely important opportunity, but I know that there are brighter minds and more committed individuals and scientists who would be taking part in this very valuable conference, and I know what will come out of it will be extremely valuable and of great importance. Thank you very much and all the best.
Okay, thank you to Dr. Pachauri for that very nice introduction. And again, welcome to all of you. It's so fantastic to see everybody here. It's almost like a dream because we've been working on planning this conference for almost a year now. And it started out just as an idea, which many of you in the room have shared, that we actually really need to understand transformation better. We need to put together all these different perspectives and dimensions on the problem. So we came together and we decided to have a conference. And we didn't have a project and we didn't have any money. So the first thing I would like to do is say thank you to all of the sponsors who came up and supported us. This includes the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Climate and Pollution Agency, the Research Council of Norway, the Ministry of the Environment, Fritt Ord, Flytoget, CSIRO in Australia, the International Social Science Council, Future Earth, the Stordalen Foundation, the Stockholm Resilience Center, Cicero, did I miss anyone? The University of Oslo, of course, and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So all of these have really helped us bring all of you together here and carry this conference out, and we're very grateful. I'd also like to thank my co-organizers from the Stockholm Resilience Center, Cicero, University of Oslo, and the International Social Science Council. Also the Scientific Advisory Board, and not the least, all the volunteers that you see here in the yellow shirts who are helping us carry this out. They come from many different countries and they're very engaged and willing to help you, so please talk to them and they will be able to help you. I mentioned a little bit about the idea of this conference, that we just felt that we really need to pull together the knowledge base that we have on transformation in the context of not just climate change, but global change. And many people have asked me, well, what are the goals of the conference? Why are you doing this? And my first answer is, Well, one of the goals is to bring together knowledge, to bring together these different perspectives. But it's not just to repeat what we know, it's to generate new ideas and new thinking about transformation. So we want this to be a generative conference. We want it to come out with publications, we want it to have dissemination, we want it to get in the conversation so that we no longer think that climate change is the biggest issue that we have to deal with, but transformation is the biggest challenge that we have in front of us. So to do this, we decided to stray away from that, as Inge Bostad mentioned earlier, this traditional conference format where each of you come and present PowerPoint presentations. We decided to make it as unconferencey as possible. Unconference isn't a word that many people know, and when it translated to Norwegian and translated back to English, it came out in the store article on our website as a non-event. So you're all, so we're participating here in a non-event for a CO2-free welfare world, is the translation. So let's see what happens. But in the format, then, we have some very, we've tried to have as much dialogue, open space, and speed paper sessions where the presentations are short but the discussions are long. Deep dialogues in a fishbowl format where participants and in the audience are allowed to come up and take part in the discussion. We have panel discussions which we're going to try to raise some of the issues. Today's question is, what is transformation? And I'm going to just spend a few words on that. We've also included a lot of art and art events and music, and not just as entertainment, as Inge said, but as a way to actually get us to think differently and to experience this differently. So the question is, what is transformation? And I looked it up in the dictionary, and it says a marked change in nature, form, or appearance. And that's a word that can apply to many things, including like making scrambled eggs. Transformations are all around us every day. It's also described as a physical and or qualitative changes in form, structure, or meaning making. So it's saying that it's not just any change, it's a qualitative change. In the IPCC Special Report on Extreme Events, it was defined in the glossary as the altering of fundamental attributes of a system, including value systems, regulatory, legislative, or bureaucratic regimes, financial institutions, and technological or biological systems. So we're starting to fill out the definition a little bit more. But it's also something that goes much deeper, and I think that that's something that we're trying to bring out in this conference as well, because it's also the powerful unleashing of human potential to commit, care, and affect change for a better life. So transformation has these multiple dimensions. Now we talk about transformation in the context of a changing climate, and this slide is almost redundant now because we know that the climate is warming. That came out in the 4th assessment report, and in the 5th assessment report it will be reiterated and emphasized even more. But it's not just climate change that we're actually talking about. We also live in a world with biodiversity loss. These are some of the planetary boundaries that Johan Rockström and colleagues, many of you in this room, have put together, and we see that nitrogen cycles, ocean acidification, stratospheric ozone depletion, all these other things are also issues that we need to take into account when we're talking about transformation. But those are not the only issues, because we also live in a world where there's issues of conflict, a gap between the rich and poor. There are issues of democratization, water, sustainable development, ethics, energy, all of these things. So what we end up then is talking about transformation as a process to address a hyper-complex problem. And hyper-complex problems are defined by dynamic complexity, where the cause and effect are distant in space and time. So what I do now affects people in other parts of the world and in other generations. And that issue of what does this mean for future generations becomes part of addressing this. It also is defined by social complexity, which is conflicting interests, cultures, and worldviews among diverse stakeholders. And this has really led us to a lot of the gridlocks in transforming or changing or responding to global challenges. And finally, there's emerging complexity, which is defined by disruptive patterns of innovation and change in situations in which the future cannot be predicted and addressed by the patterns of the past. And I think that the minister explained this really nicely with that we don't actually see the possibilities that exist for the future, and things are emerging that we don't have any idea, and that's one of the natures of complex systems. So we're talking about nonlinear problems, and this has been the nature of many of our environmental challenges, where a little change leads to a big result. So a 1 degree warming and a 2 degree warming and a 3 degree warming and a 4 degree warming aren't going to be linear, but they're going to be nonlinear effects. But what I want to focus on in terms of transformation is that we also have nonlinear solutions. So we might actually be able, social change is also a nonlinear process where some things don't look like they're changing for a while and then bubble together and create larger changes. So if we come at this conference and look at transformation as a social process and that interacts with the physical, we start to see that we actually can start to think differently about what the future holds us. Now, the paper that Dr. Pachauri was talking about is one that Linda and I started writing in the fall, and we left it aside to plan the conference. But this was about the 3 spheres of transformation. And the first sphere, the center, the bullseye of these spheres, are really the practical dimensions of transformation. And these are kind of the technical solutions, the things that we just need to have, better know-how, better experience, more, we need to just get our skills up to do this. And this is the things that we can measure. This is reductions in CO2 level, it's improved early warning systems, institutional management changes and things. These are all the things that we can tweak and that we are actually quite good at doing and that we know we can do, but we're not necessarily doing them. Why not? Well, around this we have a sphere that we refer to as the political sphere. And these are the systems and structures that we have created that are actually impeding change or supporting change. And these systems and structure, this is where we end up with conflicts. This is where it becomes very political, because who's deciding what systems and structures are existing and the future. We tend to think of these as things that we cannot change. So this is where collaborations, this is where politics really becomes important. But finally, there's also a sphere called the personal sphere, which surrounds us, which influences it's our values, beliefs, worldviews, our assumptions about the way that the world works. And this influences the way that we see the system. It's the way that we see the structures, and it's the way that we actually see the practical solutions that are available. So surrounding all of these are these different spheres that interact. So changes in the practical sphere can have influences on the systems and on and in personal, which is individual and collective values, beliefs, and worldviews. So we're looking at the interactions, and I think what is very exciting about this conference is we have people who are bringing in each of the different dimensions here to this conference. So we have people who will be talking about how do we get to a low-carbon society. We'll be talking about how do we transform communities. How do we transform politics? What do we need to do to change the economy, to the financial system? But also people who are looking at cultural dimensions, personal dimensions. What's the role of leadership? What's the role of transformative leadership? How do we change this? So we've tried to bring all of these elements into the conference, and we have a transformative leadership workshop on Saturday. We've brought in arts to try to connect the left and the right sides of the brain so that we can actually start to see different connections better. And I think that what we really want to do is try to see where the leverage points are. And there's been a lot of talk about leverage points for systems change. And this is an illustration of Donella Meadows' 12 leverage points for systems change. And you can see here that at the very end, the most powerful leverage points she talks about are paradigm shifts, changing the way we look at the system. And this is, I think, one of the issues that comes up again and again is how do we change our own way of looking at the system. And when you actually study systems change, and people do, you start to see that we are all connected in different ways, networked. And Christakis and Fowler have written a book on connected, and looking at how one person's change makes other people change, and other people change, and other people change. And people who have modeled how people changing beliefs trigger larger changes, you find that the tipping points are really about 10%. So it doesn't take a lot of people to change in order to change a system. So what this means then is that there is a lot of possibility and power for transformative change. And I think this is important because we are part of the socio-ecological system. Humans, often in the physical sciences, we get a little box, humans. But we are an important part of the system, and when we become aware that we are changing the system and aware of the system itself, then there's possibilities for actually incredible transformations. And I'm going to end with this graph here because this is the representative concentration pathways that the IPCC works with. And I usually tell students that yes, we're on a track that is faster than the red one right now. We're exceeding. But what you also see is there is this green pathway on here. And that's considered a possibility in the scenario maker. So in this conference, I think one of our goals is to really think about how do we meet? What does it take? How do we transform society? What do we do to transform it not just in any way, but in a way that is equitable, ethical, and sustainable and linked to the biosphere? And so being able to do that critical thinking on transformation and reflexive thinking on what transformation includes, I think is going to be very exciting. And so as Inga mentioned, we will be having more of these conferences, and what we really want to do is establish a collaborative community, and we're working on software for this, and we have lots of different ideas. We're working with younger generations. We have a webpage on Future Voices, which you're welcome to look at, futurevoices.org. You're welcome to look at and start blogging if anyone who has youthful ideas about the future. So I really welcome everybody, and we're tight on time, and I'm blabbing too long.